Let's talk a little bit about one of the scandals facing the administration, and they've got plenty of them. Eric Holder in the hot seat. We told you on Friday that apparently Eric Holder, the Attorney General of the United States, he himself did sign off on the Rosen, on investigating James Rosen and getting his email, personal email, and looking at phone detail for many of the calls that he made. But what's interesting is 4 days before the James Rosen story hit the fan, he was asked, Eric Holder was, on Capitol Hill about the Associated Press, and it sounds like what he's talking about, it sounds like he's actually misleading the public. Here's Eric Holder.
With regard to the potential prosecution of the press for the disclosure of material, that is not something that I've ever been involved in, heard of, or would think would be a wise policy. In fact, my view is quite the opposite.
Not something I've ever been involved in. That's what he said 4 days before the Rosen thing became public. But what we do know, according to Department of Justice people, he was involved.
I mean, that's unbelievable, because that's just a couple of days before, and now people are asking whether or not that was a truthful statement. So was the Attorney General of this country not telling the truth just a couple of days before this whole case became known? And are there other entities out there? Are there other entities out there, reporters who were also being looked into? That's I think what is the tip of the iceberg. We don't know the answer to that.
But we do know this, that for the longest time we're saying, how could you be probing James Rosen in a North Korea leak and not be curious about the Stuxnet virus released to David Sanger or anything else that appeared in his book of something in consequence that he put out? And they said, well, they did look into David Sanger. That came out over the weekend. But they didn't take David Sanger's records. They took evidently just records of high-ranking people within the administration that would have known.
On the federal side.
On the federal side, which seemed to have made more sense. However, Juan Williams argued over the weekend, oh, you can't get on Eric Holder. All he did is sign it. He didn't actually research it. You know, he actually wasn't behind it. But by this story that came out, it does look like he did more than just sign it.
I also thought it was interesting that in President Obama's speech, which had nothing to do with this topic, it was about the war on terror, or lack thereof, because they're not calling it that anymore, they brought up this exact topic. Wasn't it a little weird in that speech on Thursday? Was it on Thursday?
Yeah, it was on Thursday.
It was weird that he acknowledged that this was going on, and he also talked about the Attorney General. I thought it was an interesting timing, because then on Friday we found out that the Attorney General actually had a link to it.
Well, thank goodness. The good news is the fact that the Attorney General will be investigating what's going on. So Eric Holder will be investigating Eric Holder. That's just crazy.
I don't know if that's going to stand.
Yeah, we'll find out. Here's Dr. Krauthammer talking about how the Obama administration has actually criminalized Rosen and not the actual leakers, which is not the way it's supposed to be.
In the Rosen case, for example, the administration decided, in order to be able to really invade his privacy, to declare him essentially as a suspect, as a criminal. And yes, there is a tension between the needs of national security and a free press, and the way we have resolved that, the way we have split that difference, is to say, you prosecute the person in the government who releases the information, but you don't prosecute, you don't criminalize the journalist. That's been the understanding ever since the Nixon years.
Right.
And in fact, they did prosecute the leaker in the case, the guy who worked for the State Department, who was giving the information to James Rosen. But I think what Charles Krauthammer is saying is that usually you don't do it both ways.
Yeah, they criminalized James Rosen. They didn't criminalize David Sanger. And so there does appear to be a double standard.
This is a big theme over the last 2 weeks. Nobody's ever responsible for anything. Eric Holder's not responsible for the Justice Department. The president's not responsible for his administration.
I saw it on TV.
That's the most aggravating thing, and everything you're trying to teach people to do in life is take responsibility for your actions, take responsibility for the people that you hire and have and are in charge of. But no one takes responsibility. It doesn't seem like me. You know, Benghazi, nothing really. It's not really my decision.
Well, both situations, no matter how you look at it, are not good. For example, if they didn't know, they should have. And if they did know and they're not taking responsibility, then that's a bigger issue. But it's not good no matter how you look at it.
I would love to get somebody's perspective who actually made the decisions. There's no one acknowledges they made the decisions. We can never get the mindset of what they were thinking of when they made the decision, because they would admit to making the decision.